Shalom, shalom, shalom. What up, everybody? How y'all doing? Welcome back to this next session of Reading with Shiloh, man. I'm gonna try something. Let's see how this goes. Try it. Bam, biggie. Try this. Try it like this. There we go. We out here. All right, everybody. Shalom, everybody. Welcome back to Reading with Shiloh, man. I'm Shiloh. We're gonna see what this camera angle looking like right here. Bam! Oh, I don't like it. I might like it. We gonna see. We gonna see. Hey, when y'all come on in. Welcome. Like, comment, subscribe. Definitely comment. Let me know you out here so I can see and make sure that the comments are rolling. Comments are rolling, man. Miss Nora, also, before we get started, I got Miss Zora Neale Hurston's book, Mules and Men, that has been referenced multiple times in this book, Mules and Men. So we're going to pick a time at some point, and we are going to give this a gander, man. We're going to take a look at this and see what this thing talking about, man. Mules and Men. Simply the most exciting book in Black folklore and culture I have ever read. For the student of cultural history, Mules and Men is a treasury of Black America's folklore as collected by a famous storyteller and anthropologist who grew up hearing the songs and sermons, sayings and tall tales that have formed the oral history of the South since the time of slavery. As Zora Neale Hurston writes about her trip to her hometown of Eatonville, Florida, where she went to gather material, it was a hilarious night with a pinch of everything social mixed with the storytelling. Some of the stories were the familiar drummer type of tale about two Irishmen, Pat and Mike, or two Jews, as the case might be. Some were the European folk tales, undiluted by Jack and the Beanstalk. Others had slight social variations, but Negro imagination is so facile that there was little need for outside help. Set in intimately within the social context of Black life and stories, big old lies, songs, voodoo customs, and superstitions recorded in these pages capture the imagination and bring back to life the humor and wisdom that is the unique heritage of American Blacks. What's up, Miss Haley? So that was the back of Mules and Men, which we're going to check out at a different time. I just wanted to read it right quick. Of Mules, I think this one's going to be a funny one, man. I think this one's going to be a funny one. But we're going to finish the book at hand on the real side. On the real side. Sliding in this thing. All right. So if you're new here, welcome. If you're old, what's up, baby? We out here. I am reading Saint Superior. I am about to finish up. We're almost done. Matter of fact, I'm reading On the Real Side by Mr. Mel Watkins, A History of African American Comedy from Slavery to Chris Rock. Is what I'm reading. We're on chapter 13, section 2. There is 3 sections in chapter 13, and then we have to read the afterword, and we'll be done with the book. As of right now, this will be my 21st book. It'll be my 21st book that I would have read here on live or whatever. Yeah, many slaveries are. You're still in slavery now. But we're going to go ahead and jump in and finish the book. We're on Richard Pryor is the name of the chapter. Richard Pryor and Thereafter. Section 2. Section 2. The details and actual date of the Las Vegas debacle differ in many of Pryor's accounts of the incident. According to John A. Williams and Dennis Williams in If I Stop, I'll Die, the comedy and tragedy of Richard Pryor, the date varies from 1969 to 1971, and some accounts have Pryor simply walking off the stage while others claim that he said, "What the fuck am I doing here? I'm not going to do this anymore." Then stripped, ran into the casino, leaped onto a table, and screamed, "Blackjack." Appreciate it. Thank you. Now, Paul Rovin describes two incidents at the Aladdin Hotel in Las Vegas. One in 1967, during which Pryor stripped, and another in 1970, when he quietly walked off the stage. But John and Dennis Williams insist that there was but one confrontation at the Aladdin, and that it occurred in September of 1967. Now, their account was attributed to the author Claude Brown, and they suggest that he received his information from, among others, Bill Cosby, according to them. Pryor was performing for a group of very special people who had brought members of their family to the show. Now, when Pryor, who according to Brown may have been high and or undergoing some metamorphosis, stripped or, yes sir, harangued the audience with obscenities or otherwise insulted the very special people, he was wrestled off stage or through a panel or off the blackjack table. Whatever. Pryor, as long as Pryor's ass belonged to the very special people. Hola, hola. Now, the Williams report that Cosby and other entertainers intervened, pleading for the reversion of sentence, and that, finally, it was Cosby's entreaties that saved Pryor's life. You know, the very special people reversed their decision, shoved the jittering out of Pryor into Cosby's arms. Now, okay, Brown says they told Cos, "You can have him, but if he crosses the state line again, nobody will ever see him." Now, John and Dennis Williams' version of the Aladdin Hotel incident may or not be accurate. You know, according to Cecil Brown, for example, Claude Brown did not know Pryor until he introduced them at Berkeley, more than 2 years after the 1967 Aladdin incident. But although Pryor's Las Vegas debacle is shrouded with mystery, rumors of sinister threats from the special people, and a veil of contradictory reports, clearly Pryor was undergoing a major crisis involving his comic identity during the years of 1966 to 1970. You know, surpassing what he later called his natural material was apparently taking a personal toll. His antic behavior continued, and he had several run-ins with the law. What's up, everybody? Shalom. You know, increasingly, he seemed determined to abandon his whitewashed respectable comedy that had initially made him successful and couch his act in a voice that echoed Black Street humor. In some ways, his decision mirrored the revelation that led Flip Wilson, to overcome self-consciousness and embarrassment at negative assessments of his ethnic heritage and exclaim, "Niggas is fun." Niggas is fun. I bet they are. After I'm done reading, I'll come cut the kiwis up. Let me finish my section, and I'll do that. All right. All right. Thank you, sir. Niggas is fun, accentuating how interesting being black is, ignoring advice given by the agent who told him to avoid mentioning that he was a nigga. Now, prior being aggressively using the term to describe all blacks, as he incorporated the voices and stories of the lower class black working people and hustlers he had known in Peoria and on the black club circuit into his act. Now, fed up with the restrictions of comic appearances on television, he failed to show up for the Ed Sullivan's booking. He moved to Los Angeles in 1966 to concentrate on films and club dates. Now, in addition to the busybody, he had small roles in Wild in the Streets in 1968, The Green Berets in 1968, and The Finks in 1970. Now, none of which were memorable, but in his nightclub appearances, he experimented with a comic style that was revolutionary and shocking to mainstream audiences. Now, at first, the response was less than encouraging. White audiences often reacted with, my bad. White audiences often reacted with embarrassment and baffled silence. Even some of the hippest African Americans were initially puzzled and offended. For example, Paul Roven recounts, to prove to his managers and himself that there was an audience for this kind of material, Pryor did a show in Los Angeles, to which he invited local black disc jockeys. They hated him, taking particular offense at his frequent use of the word nigger. Now, in 1970, Pryor went underground. Since he had recently split up with his third wife and was thousands of dollars in debt, his flight from celebrity may have been inspired by personal problems. It also may have been prompted by the inhospitable reaction to his new material and threat by some club managers to cancel his engagements unless he reverted to the old routines. Man, I might have to put that thing down. Richard Pryor getting hell. Or, as some contend, Pryor may have been blacklisted because of the Aladdin Hotel incident. Now, Pryor on accounts of this period are evasive and contradictory. Whatever the immediate cause, he gathered his belongings from his Los Angeles apartment and moved north to Berkeley. It was in the center of student protests, radical thought, and academic freedom that he earnestly set about developing a more authentic black voice for his comedy routine. Out of the spotlight, the disconsolate stand up a little bit. Now, out of the spotlight, the disconsolate comedian reportedly began the rigorous self-evaluation and transformation that allowed him openly to embarrass the street humor, folklore, and downtrodden but wise characters that would soon distinguish his act. Now, removed from the influence of entertainment professionals who had charted him on a safe, middle-of-the-road course, Pryor began to examine African American history and to see himself and his humor in a larger context of ethnic pride. His personal evolution was aided immensely by the new group of acquaintances, such bright young black writers and intellectuals as Ishmael Reed, Cecil Brown, Al Young, Claude Brown, and David Henderson, some of who were experimenting with black folklore, street humor, gallows humor in their own literary works. Now, the interaction between these college-educated writers and the brilliant upstart's comic no doubt was mutually beneficial. Despite frustrations with his career, Pryor was successful and nationally known entertainer who had established a foothold, however precarious, in show business. His success in the cutthroat commercial world was appreciated by writers who were struggling to achieve national prominence. Now, Pryor, on the other hand, could not have helped being impressed by accredited intellectuals who nevertheless shared his affection and enthusiasm for the humor and lifestyles of common black folks. Now, as James Haskins observes in Richard Pryor, a man and his madness in the liberal atmosphere of Berkeley, Pryor found support for his refusal to do colorless material. Inspired by his literary friends, Pryor began reading such material as the collected speeches of Malcolm X, whom he came to regard as someone who thinks like I do. He also began concentrating on writing new material, and perhaps influenced by Ishmael Reed's hoodoo western, Yellow Black Radio Broke Down, began a script for a cowboy movie, which he called The Black Stranger. That script led to Pryor's later efforts as a co-writer with Mel Brooks and others on Blazing Saddles in 1974. Now, primarily, however, Pryor intensifies his first-hand research of the ghetto types who would people his routines in the future. He began remembering the people he knew here in Peoria, the drunks, the braggarts, the bullies, and he started working with them, said his old Peoria friend, Jolentine Whittamaker. Juliet Whittaker. He went to the ghetto and started watching people, haunting the hip bars and clubs in Oakland, San Francisco, and Berkeley. He studied the crowds, then returned to his apartment and taped his impressions of the people he had seen. When he had worked out the routine based on his research, he tried it and out with one of the local clubs, such as Basin Street West in San Francisco or the Mandrakes in Berkeley. Now, the novelist Cecil Brown met Pryor at Mandrakes after a friend told him, "There's a comedian down there who's crazier than you." Impressed by Pryor's free association and stream of consciousness approach to comedy, Brown became one of the comic's closest Bay Area friends. They began a collaborative writing association that ultimately produced Which Way Is Up in 1977, which is a damn good movie. Damn good movie. For me, one of my favorite Richard Pryor movies, Which Way Is Up? And several other unfilmed scripts. Now, Brown also introduced Pryor to Berkeley's coterie of black writers, and that group formed the early version of the much publicized Hollywood Black Pack, which emerged in the late 80s and included Eddie Murphy, Robert Townsend, Keenen Ivory Wayans, and other comedians and writers. Now, in addition to the writers, according to Brown, the Berkeley clique included a few lesser known but even grittier ghetto personalities. Excuse me. Now, among them were Reverend Banks, a kind of preacher type from the Deep South who was full of folklore, and a felon who ran into y'all don't like when I see things like this. Where is it? Damn, you can't see it. See the line, the push. Sometimes I'm not sure how to read that. You know, I know it's an extension. It just don't seem right. I'm not sure how to read it. And a felon who ran into. Should it be a pause? Who ran into? He was a funny dude. Just got out of prison. It sounds like a run-on sentence. But anyway, let's try to read it again. In addition to the writers, according to Brown, the Berkeley clique included a few lesser known but even grittier ghetto personalities. Among them was Reverend Banks, a kind of preacher type from the deep South who was full of folklore, and a felon who we ran into. He was a funny dude, just got out of prison. They partied together and often rapped well into the night, exchanging stories and ideas. Now, Richard was pulling material from all of us, Brown said. He would listen to the tales, like one night somebody mentioned how his father had told him to get that bass out of your voice, and soon it would appear into Richard's act. He would add to it, shape it, and the next day he'd use it. Now, Pryor's Berkeley retreat ultimately proved to be a source of genuine inspiration. And in 1971, confident at least of the direction in which he wanted to take his humor, he returned to Los Angeles. Now, although he was still testing nuances of the revamped approach in small clubs, it was shortly after Pryor's return to Los Angeles, Cosby caught his act and later recalled, "I was in the audience when Richard took on a whole new persona, his own." Now, Richard killed that Bill Cosby in his act and made people hate it. Then he worked on them, doing pure Pryor, and it was the most astonishing metamorphosis I had ever seen. He was magnificent. Now, indeed, Pryor's startling transformation, his switch to the candid presentation of the character-based comedy derived from aspects of Black culture, language, and humor that, at least on the stage, had been previously ignored or methodically exercised, was simply dumbfounding to many audiences. Its first significant exposure outside of small clubs, filled with ultra-hip devotees, came with the release of the album Craps After Hours, which he recorded live from the predominantly Black crowd at the Red Fox Club in Hollywood and released in February of 1971. Now, although still raw, that performance is the earliest recorded example of the new Richard Pryor. Now, the timid, hesitant references to racial topics are gone, and instead, Richard boldly employs racial topics, touching on subjects such as police harassment of Blacks and the differences in sexual attitudes between the races, using an after-hours club called Hank's as the setting. He unleashes a galaxy of street characters, prostitutes, pimps, con men, who authentically mirror the bottom rung of ghetto life. Now, although it is now considered one of Pryor's best albums, initially, record sales were dismal. Even the Black audiences from whom it was intended, people nurtured on the frequently scatological, explicitly sexually material heard on Red Fox's recordings and ignored it at first. And when Pryor first introduced the new routines to integrated mainstream audiences, he was often greeted with stunned silence or uneasy, embarrassed chuckles. Much of this material was tested at the Improv in New York City. Now, his September 1971 appearance before a relatively hip crowd was taped and later released as Live and Smoking, a video film that demonstrated the expanded creative possibilities of his new approach and as well as its hazards. By then, the processed hair was gone, replaced by an afro, and his vulnerable, boyish appearance was veiled with a goatee and mustache, which gave him a raffish, militant look that was often reflected in his material. And he opened with, "Yeah, I'm really nervous because I ain't had no cocaine all day." I imagine a lot of y'all will be leaving during my shit. I hope I'm funny and shit, because just to be a nigga standing up here saying nothing ain't shit. Now, the noticeable fidgety Pryor then plunged into a routine that included material introduced on his Craps album, as well as rough versions of some brilliant bits that would appear on his best-selling mid-70s albums. Now, I never wanted to be white. I never wanted to be white. No, I always wanted to be something different, than a nigga, because niggas had it so rough. I tried to be black, a black cat with neat hair. I thought that was the problem, the hair. I say, if my hair is straight, then white to dig me. So I got a process. Wrong. You be Puerto Rican with a process. In the Midwest, Puerto Ricans was famous, not like New York. No, because they just got a lot of Puerto Ricans. They got like 3 in the whole Midwest. I was one of them. I was jiving. I was a nigga from 23 years. I gave it up, no room for advancement. They're subjective. These subjective jives at the burdens and perils of being an African American got mild laughs. As did Pryor's wino and old philosopher tale, which often turned into the contrast between black-white language and behavior. I like 2 more pages. I lied. Ooh, I lied. Thought it was 2 more pages. Three more pages. 3 more pages. I'm one of the first coloreds. Man in the FBI, that's right. J. Edgar Hoover appointed me personally, girl. Wanted somebody on the railroad to watch the Mexicans. That's right. Because couldn't nobody in the Bureau at that particular time speak Mexican talk. And they hired me. I could understand Mexican because I hear them talking. I say, what you say, motherfucker? They tell me. When Pryor's wit turned outward, lampooning mainstream white attitudes, the laughter subsided noticeably. Yeah. I remember Tricks used to come through our neighborhood. That's where I first met white people. They come down through my neighborhood to help the economy. Nice white dudes though. Hello, little boy. Is your mother home? I'd like a blowjob. I wonder what would happen if niggas go through white neighborhoods doing that. Hey man, is your mama home? Tell the bitch we want to fuck. Tell that bitch we fuck. Ain't no niggas going to the moon. You know that. First of all, ain't no niggas qualified. So you all tell us. Niggas was hip. They'd help y'all go to the moon. Hey man, let's organize and help those white motherfuckers get to the moon so they can leave us alone. What's up, my boy? Oh Lord, another one. Good Lord, come on, sucker. Oh Lord, Lord. Let me crack your back with a hug. Oh Lord. A hug you, Lord. I love you, my boy. I love you, my boy. I cracked it back, boy. I'll crack it. You want to hug me? I'm gonna crack you. All right. When Pryor became more ever irreverent, turning his satire towards religion or sex with white women, the audience lapsed into the embarrassed silence that was occasionally punctuated by hostile murmurings. Now, a bit about Jesus' mama, alleged virginity, brought disgruntled ohs and ahs was, as did an offhand comment about his Dracula routine. You expect Dracula to jump out at you and any second? If he did, I'd have held that cross up because he's allergic to bullshit. His comments on interracial sex, however, elicited the most negative responses. The quip, I like white women. I could be a revolutionary, but I like white women with big titties, was greeted with cold silence, as were his comments about President Nixon's daughter. Now, Tricia Nixon can't give her pussy away. Even the Secret Service man. Oh nah, I gotta wash the car. When he added that the most important part of being a Negro was fucking white girls. There was a distinctly hostile buzz. Some people left. There was a distinctly hostile buzz, and some people left. Some people left, prompting Pryor to say, I hate to see folks leave when I be talking. I hope y'all get raped by black folks with clap. And ain't nothing worse than the black clap. Ain't nothing worse than the black clap. Now, after launching into his wino and junkie routine, the best and most well-received part of his act that night, Pryor concluded that with a bit about Martin Luther King Jr., which ended with, I've been to the mountaintop too, and what did I see? More white folks with guns. It was a new, unadulterated, brutally realistic Richard Pryor. He had clearly adopted what he called a character-heavy approach to comedy, with that would be called, among other things, the theater of his routine. It was basically comedy without jokes, a combination of ironic observation and realistic portrayals of mainstream society's outcasts and marginal people that elicited pathos as well as the humorous release that comes from recognition of another human being's fallables. Now, as Pryor explained, I take the emotion to a peak and then level it off with a nice laugh. But although, as soon but although lost my spot. But although his soon-to-be legendary characters were in place and his language and delivery had assumed the unmistakable tenor of Blackstreet humor, there was still some hesitancy and ambiguity in Pryor's narrative voice when he abandoned his characters and spoke as himself. Now, his anxious glances about the room after he launched his most scathing satirical lines and emerged from the portrayal of some blasphemous ghetto character may be derived as his suggested from his nervousness because the show was being filmed. But it probably also resulted from his awareness that he was not only participating in the introduction of a relatively new style of comic performance, but initiating a crucial breakthrough in African American stage humor as well. Now, the racial satire in his humor was not new. Dick Gregory, Godfrey Cambridge, and to the lesser extent, Moms Mabley and Red Fox had introduced similar material to white audiences. But with the possible exception of Flip Wilson, Pryor's disclosure of previously closely guarded comic reference, racially biased attitudes, and cultural eccentricities that were often embarrassments to the black middle class and stereotypes in the minds of most whites, was untried on the mainstream stage. Now, Pryor was not only challenging traditional shows business assumptions about the viability of ungentrified black material and an unmoderated black voice, but also breaking with blacks' long-standing tradition of subterfuge and concealment of inter-community customs. So it was not surprising that at the outset he occasionally pulled back. Nor was it surprising that in the early 70s, he chose to hone his act in black clubs and theaters. Now, as the improv date demonstrated, white audiences often fail to recognize the subtle indirection in Pryor's delivery. The way African Americans say a whole lot of things underneath you, all around you, as he put it, and were bewildered by some language and cultural references that were routine in black circles. He paused in disbelief certain times. For example, when the crowd seemed puzzled by subjects that for most blacks were ordinary occurrences. Although, like Flip Wilson, he insisted that black crowds were tougher to please. Although, like Flip Wilson, he insisted that black crowds were tougher to please. Black crowds, not clouds, were tougher to please. He understood that to enhance or even maintain his authentic edge, it was necessary to direct his act at an African American sensibility. So while he played hipper, integrated spots such as the improv during this period, he concentrated on show places with nearly exclusive black audiences. He appeared in black theaters and clubs in large cities such as Washington, Chicago, and Detroit, and of course at Harlem's Apollo Theater. But even in those citadels of inbred African American entertainment where tolerance for off-color humor was high, the reception was not always positive, and many customers were offended by what Jack Schiffman refers to as Pryor's pure and unadulterated vulgarity. Bobby Schiffman, manager of the Apollo during those years, recalls that he was dirty, and there were possibly a lot of people who walked, but Richie was before his time. Still, despite offending, Two more pages. Shit. Thought I had two more pages. Sure. Still, despite offending some people, Pryor was slowly building a grassroots following among African Americans, particularly those under 35, who were increasingly rejecting the traditional black middle class tactic of de-emphasizing cultural differences between the races and embracing the Black Power stratagem, which, besides its political agenda, encouraged an assertive flaunting of ethnic behavior that had been disapprovingly associated with the black masses and self-consciously suppressed. Militant New Voices, the Black Panthers, and the Stokely Carmichael, among others, reflected a shift of African American mood, so Pryor's switch to an outspoken black voice occurred at precisely the right time. His early 70s concert tour created a solid foundation of black followers. And at the same time, He was making significant inroads in mainstream entertainment. Now, both behind the scenes and in front of the camera, he wrote for the Flip Wilson and Red Fox shows and worked as a co-star and co-writer on Lily Tomlin's two 1973 television specials. He won an Emmy for his writing contribution to Lily. The second of those shows, which was honored as Outstanding Comedy Variety Special, although disappointed at the beginning at being passed over for the lead role of the black comedy in Blazing Saddles. In 1974, he won awards from both the American Academy of Humor and the Writers Guild of America as a co-writer of the movie. Pryor's most notable film role during this time was his supporting part as piano man in Motown's Lady Sings the Blues in 1972. Ooh, I feel that sleep monster coming on me. Oh, man. I feel the sleep monster coming on. I have to stand up. Shit. He also appeared in such less publicized films as Whack Stacks in 1972, Some Call It Loving in 1973, and Dynamite Chicken in 1973, The Mac 1973, The Hit in 1973. He had a cameo role in the Bill Cosby Sidney Poitier hit Uptown Saturday Night in 1974. And despite this exposure, Pryor had not yet found the vehicle that would elevate him to the status of either a mainstream film or a comic star. Oh, man. Oh, man. Oh, he just got on me, that sleep, man. The sleep monster just got on me, man. Get off yourself. Whew. Trying to hold it together. Cause that monster on my back. Shit. Now on stage, however, his popularity was growing, and African Americans flocked to see his incessantly black humor. But as Pryor put it, it was human humor too. And human beings were liking it. I'd get confused to see more and more whites in the audience. What was happening was that they were saying, hey, we're people. We enjoy something good. And when his comedy album, That Nigga Crazy, was released in 1974, it surprised record industry executives with its appeal to young whites as well as blacks. It went gold and won the Grammy Award for Best Comedy Recording of the Year. And the album was followed in 1975 by Is It Something I Said, which also went gold and won another Grammy. Now, those albums featuring material developed and published in his concert tour and recorded by predominantly black audiences present a much more poised comedian. Now, Pryor had eliminated some of the raw edges heard on the Craps album, moving from characters to narrative voices, which much more finesse and showed little of a hesitancy or anxiety seen on the live and smoking improv appearance. That Nigga's Crazy, in fact, contains the best recorded performances of some of the Pryor's most memorable routines. And focusing primarily on humorous insight derived from the difference between blacks and white social customs, he moves easily from contrasting views of popular films. Y'all seen The Exorcist? It's a story about the devil. Gets into this 12-year-old girl. Now, devil's a low motherfucker. Jack, see, there wouldn't have been a movie, it had been niggas in it. Movie would have been about 7 minutes long. Hello? In the eerie, rasping voice of the movie possessed child. Goodbye. To explorations of how male-female relationships differ in black and white communities. White men and women, they seldom ever have fistfights. White men and women, they seldom ever have fistfights. They be going intellectual, hurting each other. So they say, white women say some funny shit to her, man. Your dick is short and you can't even screw. And the white dude go, we'll discuss it tomorrow. You say that shit to a nigga, you gon' fight. Bitch, is you crazy? Oh, bitch, is you crazy? All right. Occasionally, the contrast veers into more pertinent social issues. You know, police live in y'all neighborhoods. Hello, Officer Timpson. Going bowling tonight? Yes. Hey, nice Pinto you have. Ha ha ha. Niggas don't know them like that. See, white folks get a ticket, they pull over. Here, officer, yes, glad to be of help. Cheerio. Niggas got to be talking about, I am reaching into my pocket for my license because I don't want to be no motherfucking accident. Now, more often, Pryor stays on the lighter level and highlights the disparity between the usually controlled behavior of whites and the more robust and spontaneous interaction of blacks. A black family's rowdy Tabor manners, for instance, is contrasted with the exaggeratedly stilted etiquette of a sedate white family. Now, pass the potatoes. Thank you, darling. Can I have a bit of that sauce? How are the kids coming along in their studies? Now, think we'll be having sexual intercourse this evening. We're not. Oh, what the heck. This album also contains the best recorded performances. The best recorded performances, video or audio, of Pryor's legendary Dracula and Wino and Junkie routines, as well as many of the signature one-line quips and observations that become code words to his admirers. Now, two of the most famous are a man's response to a woman's claim that she can't have sex because of her period. Bitch, you ain't gonna bleed to death. And another man's desperate plea. Bitch, you ain't gonna bleed to death. And another man's desperate plea when he was unable to get aroused. Oh God, Lord, don't let me know. Just let it stay heavy if it's not hard. Oh God, Lord, don't let her know. Just let it stay heavy if not hard. Others range from the comparatively innocent. Better lay off that narcotic, nigga. That shit done made you null and void. Or could you exercise this motherfucker to Cleveland or someplace, to the more profane? This bitch was fine, Pops. I ain't lying. Bitch was so fine, I wanted to suck her daddy's dick. I don't know about that one, Richard Pryor. I don't know about that one. We're almost there. These routines showcase Pryor's range and perhaps explained his growing popularity among white audiences. He often focused on social issues reflecting African Americans' inequitable treatment, but he did not avoid touchy issues within the black community. Both his fearlessness And ecumenical. Let's see what that word is. Let's see what that word is. Ecumenical. It's almost like economy or economical. Ecumenical. The word is spelled ECUMENICAL. Ecumenical. ECU. There it goes. Ecumenical. Ecumenical, adjective of or encouraging universal Christian unity. And the universal Christian unity nature of his humor was demonstrated. And the ecumenical nature of his humor were demonstrated. For example, by a comment about interracial relationships that was greeted with boos and catcalls and nearly caused his audience to turn on him. Excuse me. Don't ever marry a white woman in California. A lot of you sisters don't ever marry a white woman in California. A lot of you sisters probably saying, don't marry a white woman anywhere, nigga. You know, shit. Why would you be happy? Sisters look at you like you kill your mama when you got out with a white woman, when you go out with a white woman. And you can't laugh that shit off either. Aware of the limits to which he could push the crowd, even if he did not always confine himself to them, Pryor definitely acknowledged that some of his material might be stretching the boundaries of good taste for even an admiring audience. I see some older people in the audience looking at me and say, boy, you ought to be ashamed of yourself. Come on, yes, sir. What you asking for? Oh Lord, my boy. What you smiling on big for? What you got that big grin on your face, huh? What you got that big grin on your face for, boy? What you got that grin? Boy, you don't need to read? Boy, you not up here reading books, boy? I'm up here reading this book, boy. What you don't mess with me? Trying to get a hug. I'm up here trying to read to people. The googly movement. Great Caesar's ghost. Nice. Jumping Jehoshaphat. Beware of the limits. Aware of the limits. Great Caesar's ghost. I be trying to find a bunch of old time words to say so I don't be saying fuck, God damn it. So I don't be like Richard Pryor up here talking about bitch. My bad. We almost there, man. We almost there. Aware of the limits to which he could push the crowd, even if he did not always confine himself to them, Pryor deftly acknowledged that some of his material might be stretching the boundaries of good taste for even his admiring audience. Now, I see some older people in the audience look at me and say, that boy, you ought to be ashamed of yourself. And a year later, on the If It's Something I Said album, Pryor continued his comic exploration of the difference between black and white culture and social customs. One bit begins with, white folks date different than we do, and proceeds as Pryor satirizes whites' pretended disinterest in sex. Good night, dear. Been a pleasure being with you. And blacks' obsession with it. Niggas spent $34. Somebody giving up something. You damn right. I need my shit for that $34. Somebody giving up something. Another monologue compares white churches, which are too scary and have pictures of Jesus hanging around looking at your ass. All right. We're almost done, man. We got one more page left. One more page. We're almost to the end of this section. There's white churches, which are too scary, and just living from the city. Living from the city. This album, however, contains more pointed racial satire than his previous records. Pryor opens with, God, good God, boy, a lot of niggas here today. I can hear my papa. Good God, there's a lot of niggas out here today. Good God. A lot of niggas out here today. Some white folks too. Look up here. You motherfuckers come in bunch. Stick with me. Don't worry about a thing. Just come on. Shortage of white people lately. I don't see no white folks no more. Y'all stop fucking. On the trend of whites adopting Vietnamese children, Pryor remarks, people in Mississippi, white folks in Georgia, adopting babies. Shit gonna last for about a year. Then that racism gonna come out. God damn it, what the hell we got here, Margot? Ain't his eyes ever gonna round out? Like one of the neighborhood coons. Look like one of the neighborhood coons. And on the influx of Vietnamese in general, we, the motherfuckers, got to give up the jobs fund. Got all the Vietnamese in the army camps and shit, taking tests and stuff, learning how to say nigger so they can be good citizens. In a routine about the courts, Pryor remarks, I went to jail for income tax evasion, right? I didn't know a motherfucking thing about no taxes. I told the judge, said, Your Honor, I forgot, He said, you'll remember next year, nigga. They give niggas time like it's lunch down there. You go down there looking for justice, that's what you find, just us. Now, as in most of his performances, the comedy on the album was wide-ranging, with Pryor caustically launching into subjects as varied as sexual contretemps between men and women, jail, President Nixon, and the curious turn of a man's ego when his woman leaves him. And moreover, balancing the numerous urban street types that dominated his black characters, Pryor introduces his down-home recanter, Mudbone, whose oblique satire and rambling riffs about the old days allowed Pryor to bolster his performances with examples of traditional folk tales and rural wit. Rural wit. With these mid-70s albums, Pryor had more or less set the parameters of his humor and won over a hardcore African American following, as well as a scattering of hip, young, white devotees. His status as a cult star was affirmed by the invitation to appear as guest host on Saturday Night Live in December of 1975. Now, with the 1976 release of the new album, Bicentennial Nigga, and the movie Silver Streak, in which Pryor co-starred with Gene Wilder and stole the film, and the debut of his own television show in 1977, Pryor was fast becoming a crossover star. Now, still, there was resistance in some quarters. It is considered a classic now, but the Richard Pryor Show lasted less than 2 months, in September to October of 1977 on television. Now, besides its mediocre ratings, NBC honchos were rankled, but its blunt, irreverent satire, and when Pryor resisted moderating his approach, the show's fate was sealed. Now, during the same period, in addition to Red Fox and Sanford and Son, the black sitcoms What's Happening, ABC in 1976 to 1979, The Jeffersons, CBS 1975 to 1985, with Sherman Hemsley and Good Times on CBS in 1974 to 1979, with Jimmy Walker, were thriving, each in its own way, spotlighted the more acceptable ethnic humor that Flip Wilson had popularized on TV. And in fact, Walker, with his mugging, physical comedy, and rousing exclamation, "Dynamite!" had become one of the most popular comedians on television. His role as JJ, however, was one of the reasons that same critics labeled the 70s sitcoms the new minstrelsy, and only Fox as Sanford, Hemsley as the feisty but larcenous businessman George Jefferson, and Marla Gibbs as the Jeffersons' caustic homekeeper consistently brought real bite to their roles. Now, none, however, came close to the ruckus satire of Pryor's show. It was simply ahead of its time. And still, by the time Richard Pryor live in concert, his first filmed concert performance distributed in theaters, was released in 1979, Pryor had not only become one of Hollywood's most sought-after movie stars, but was also considered the nation's most creative funny man. You know, playwright Neil Simon, for example, called him the most brilliant comic in America. There's no one funnier or more perceptive. With his ascendancy and exposure, for the first time, authentic African-American humor appeared in mass media. Man, and that was section 2 of chapter 13 of On the Real Side by Mr. Mel Watkins. And we're moving along, man. We are moving along. We got one section left. We got section 3 left and the afterward. Section 3. So when we come back tomorrow, this will be section 3. Section 3. And then I might even just, man, we'll see, man. We'll see. I might even just go ahead and read section 3 and finish the afterward and just go ahead and finish the book out. We'll see later on tonight, maybe. Maybe tomorrow. Maybe tomorrow, man. We'll see. We'll see. But for right now, man, we pushed through it. That sleep monster was getting on me. I had to stand up, man. Stand up. I had to stand up, man. It was on me. But we got through. We got through. We pushed through. And we're gonna keep on pushing, man. One book at a time, one chapter at a time, one section at a time, one session at a time, one page at a time, one line at a time, line upon line, here a little, there a little, till we finish the book, till we finish that book. And then we're gonna figure out which one else we're gonna read. All right. So these 3 books are definitely on the horizon. I definitely want to read one of my brother's book, Azaniah ben Israel. Who blessed you? That one has to get read. I want to read that one. Oh shit. I definitely want to read the Zora Neale Hurst book to go in conjunction with On the Real Side, since it's mentioned, so much. And I definitely want to read the Medical Apartheid. So I just gotta figure out the order. It's gonna be read in, since we're almost done with On the Real Side. So, but we'll see, man. We'll see. Either way it go, we're gonna come back and keep pushing, man. We're reading with SHILO, and I'm out here. Hopefully, let's get your mind right, like I'm trying to get mine right. So it is what it is. But till next time, man. SHILO out. Shalom, everybody. Thank you for tuning in, chiming in with your comments, with your likes. Whoever has done that, whoever did it, thank you. Appreciate it. We're gonna keep pushing, man. We're gonna keep pushing one day at a time, one book at a time. Shalom.